everybody, my name's Steve, I'm the British Railroader and welcome to my model railroad room for a short video about programming Soundtraxx sound decoders. But before I get into that, I want to talk to you about the Model Rail Replacement podcast. Now, as you know, I've been a guest on the podcast a couple of times and I enjoy being part of the Model Rail Replacement podcast family, as it were. But the other day, I got a phone call from James, a text from James to say they've recorded the first interview for this season's first show, which is due on Monday, the 1st of September. The only problem is Sam was out of the country to record the intro and outro part with James. So they were looking for a volunteer, and of course I stepped up. So if you can't get enough of me on YouTube, I'm going to be on the Model Rail Replacement podcast just for a little bit on Monday, the 1st of September. They've also got some other person on there who's talking about their layout, but let's not worry about them. I'm the important one. But anyway, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, go on to Spotify, or even you can find it here on YouTube. Go and have a listen. Sam and James are great. They've got some great, wonderful bantery episodes. They've got fantastic guests on there, including myself, of course. And please go and support them. They do a great job. In today's video, I thought I would do something slightly different in relation to Soundtraxx decoders. Now, you all know that Soundtraxx are my favorite sound decoders for my US diesels, and in fact, you know, you can get Soundtraxx decoders as well for some UK prototypes. But I've been fitting them for a long time, and whilst I've done several videos about fitting them, I've never done a video about how I program them. And the thing is I've over the years kind of developed my own likes and dislikes for programming my locomotives. Now, as you know from previous videos, I got this locomotive. This is an Atlas locomotive and it came sound fitted, but it was fitted with a Locksound 5 decoder from ESU. Now, Locksound 5 decoders are pretty damn good decoders. There is absolutely nothing wrong with them. I'm just not a fan of ESU Locksound mainly because I really don't understand them as well as I understand Soundtraxx decoders. So I thought to myself, well, maybe I could just swap the decoders out. And I could. It's a 21-pin plug in here. And so I took the ESU Locksound out, which is now with my friend Andy, who's a big fan of ESU decoders. And I put the Soundtraxx equivalent in, plugged it in, sounds all came up fine. Whilst I was in there, I also fitted a Keep Alive. The Keep Alive that I'm using is from AE Models. These are available, I think it's through DCC Concepts. They're great Keep Alives. I've had to use the very smallest one. It doesn't give you huge amounts of keep alive time, and we were talking 2, maybe 3 seconds at most, but that should be all I really need. I'm going to see how it goes. I could fit a slightly larger one because I had to take part of the weight out anyway, but I'm going to see how these smaller ones go. Now, as I said, it all worked fine, and I thought, oh, fantastic. How easy is this? And I'll go and do the programming. So I did a video where down on my workbench, and I was happily programming, explaining to people what I was doing. I was going to then say, oh, I'll flash up this on screen and blah, 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 blah. And in the end, I got to a point where I was programming something into this, and the sound got very, very loud, and the speakers sounded like a bowl of snap, crackle, and pop. They just crunched and crunched and crunched and crackled. And now this is speeding up or revving up. Second motor's coming on. A bit of crackle there. I might need to deal with that. And then the third one. So I'm going to take her right down because I don't like the crackle on. And I thought, oh no, what's happened here? So I stopped filming. I looked into the body shell and realized that The decoders were two very small sugar cube decoders. And whilst I turned the sound down, which I'll explain to you, which you will see, in fact, one of the only surviving bits of that footage is me about turning the sound down. Even though I turned the sound down, it just was too much for these speakers. Soundtraxx decoders have 2-watt output. A lot of speakers aren't rated for that. You need more than one speaker and have them wired in parallel. And this had 2 speakers in it. But so I tried swapping out the speakers, and I tried my normal sugar cube speakers, which I wire in series, and even they were having problems. So in the end, I had to cut another piece of the weight out of the back. And I put into this an iPhone speaker. So this is an iPhone 8 loudspeaker. You can get them for a few pounds off of eBay. I've got a couple of them in stock. I have used them before, and it is the sweetest sound that I've had from any decoder. To the point where I'm starting to think maybe this is what I should standardize on. They are 8 ohm speakers. I've checked. You can, put a multimeter across the contacts and check that. They are 8 ohm speakers. So I don't know what the wattage input is, but they seem to be able to handle anything that comes out of a Soundtraxx decoder. And let's face it, we've all been on a train where somebody's on their iPhone talking to their friend, and you can hear clear as day what everybody's saying. So, I think they're designed for that kind of output. So what I thought would be a very simple install actually took me a bit more time, but I'm very glad that it happened, because the sound that I'm getting for this, which I will let you listen to in a moment, is really, really good. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to talk about when you're programming your decoders, try and make sure that you have available to you all of the information. And Soundtraxx are past masters at this. Now, they produce, for their Tsunami 2, a diesel user's guide. Okay, so this is actually only half of it. There is another one of these the same size. This goes through virtually everything that you will need to know from basic programming, etc., and how to set up the light functions. This is a must. They do one for their electric decoders. They do one for their steam. They do one for the Balloon Army. They do them for Aiken Army. Download it, have it on your computer, and if you get the opportunity, like I have, print it up. But on top of that, they have this. And this is their diesel technical reference. And basically what this goes through every single CV and tells you what it does and what their default settings are. And it allows you to then make a few more judgments. So I highly recommend that you download all of the necessary paperwork and have it on hand when you when you are programming your locomotive. Now, what I'm going to do, we're going to move over to my computer, okay, and we're going to go through my CV settings. I have a pro forma that I use, and if anybody's interested in nicking it from me, you're more than welcome. Drop me an email and I will email you over a copy that you can then fiddle with and do with what your heart's content. But what I'm going to do just very quickly is I'm going to show you 2 pieces of video. The first one is the locomotive when the sound just went, and then the locomotive with the new speakers, and then we'll get on to the main part of the video. Okay, so here it is with the new speaker. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rev her up. And hopefully you can hear absolutely no crackling. And that's the separate prime movers coming in. And we'll just close her down. There, that's much better compared with the other bit of video. So what we've got here is my record that I keep for each of my locomotives. So I decided very early on that I needed to keep track of all of the CVs that I'd programmed, whether it's a sound locomotive or not. It really helps to be able to have them to glance at a sheet. And I've got this on my Google Documents. I can convert it into a PDF or a Microsoft Word file, etc. if I want to, but it's just handy. And I've got, if I just show you here, if we just go back, you can see I've got loco info documents for all of my locos here. But obviously the one that we're looking at is the Metro ports, which I've now completely lost. No, there it is. There we go. So let's click onto that. So in this box up here, we've just got some general bits and pieces, the make of the model of the locomotive, what the number is, what the address is. I also put any details like what decoders in there, what kind of speakers, what kind of keep alive. I've even got a place if I decide to name the driver and conductor. And as you can see, I've kind of grouped CVs together. So I've got a section that I call the NMRA mandatory CVs, even though one of them isn't. I've got the main sound controlling CVs. We've then got anything specific to lighting effects. We've got motor control. I've got one that I just call others. It's just for ones that are others. Any information I want to put on function effects. If I want to work out what the scale speeds are, I can do it just here. And then down here, this is my list of functions. Now, I have mentioned this in the past, but I actually remap about a third of the functions that Soundtraxx has, because for the way that I use my locomotives, it's easier for me. For example, if we look here, and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Let me just do this. There we go. So you can see that better. You can see here that function 3, when I reprogram my locos, is set up for the grade crossing signal. Now, as a default, that function, the grade crossing signal function, is usually on function 9. And so I've just changed it slightly so that it's all around. But we will talk about that in a moment. And let's just scroll back up to the top. So we're going to start with what I call the NMRA mandatory CVs. So these are CVs that you're going to find in every single decoder. And these are CVs 2, 3, 4, 5 and 29. Now, I've also put CV6 in there, and there's a reason for that because it kind of goes with all of the others. So CV2 is your start voltage, 3 and 4 are acceleration and deceleration, CV5 is your top voltage, CV6 is your mid voltage, and CV29 is your configuration data. Now, the configuration data I actually explained in my video about why DCC fitted locomotives don't always run on DC layouts. So I'm not going to go through how to calculate CV29 in this video, but I'm going to refer you to that video and I will link it in the description. But all of these CVs, basically, they're your basic motor control, and they're also, with CV29, your basic setup. They will always vary depending on your locomotive and depending on your needs. In this case, I've got a start voltage of 0, a mid voltage of 50 and a top voltage of 150. Now, bear in mind that all of these can be set between anywhere between 0 and 255. But what I've done is created a very gentle 3-point curve. So it very gently goes from speed step 1, where the start voltage is 0, up to the mid-speed step where it's 50, and then goes up quite quickly to that top voltage where at speed step 128 it will be 150. Now that's just the way I've set this loco up, just to get it running as smoothly as I want it and so that it works well at lower speeds. Again, with the acceleration and the deceleration, you can put as much or as little in as you want. Again, this, you know, you can crank it right up and it will take forever to move off. That's not particularly realistic and it's not really practical. I give a little bit of acceleration and deceleration. I want it to start in a reasonable time, but not go straight from 0 to 60, for example, without at least some build up. Now, CV29, as I said, I'm not going to tell you how to calculate it, but I tend to use 34, and I think I explained why I came up with this in my other video. But this makes sure that the loco's running forward, that the 3-point speed table is on, that it will respond to 28/128 speed steps, and it's got the extended address. Now, just to mention about addresses, and again, I explained this in the other video, but this particular locomotive has got an address of 805, which fits in the extended address range. If I, for example, wanted to just call it number 8, I wouldn't necessarily have the extended address switched on. But that's something that controllers will do for you automatically anyway. So they are, as I say, what I call the NMRA mandatory CVs. If we just scroll a little bit now, these are the core sound functions that I look at. Now, a lot of them are volumes. So we have here, for example, number 128 is the master volume, 129 the air horn, 130 the bell. On most locos, 131 would be the prime mover, but because this is a genset which theoretically has 3 prime movers, there are actually 3 sound controls, and as standard, they're set up from 100 up to 220, so that as the next one comes on, you can hear it come on over the one underneath. There are lots and lots and lots of sound effects, and all of them have their own separate volume control. So you can turn them up, turn them down. I do have a secondary list, which I'm not going to go through here, but I sometimes turn down certain volumes. So for example, if a locomotive has an air conditioner, I'll make sure that the volume control for the air conditioner unit is on. It's an automatic sound. You'll hear it go off every now and again. Whereas if there's no air conditioner, I will set that to 0, because what's the point of having an air conditioner come on if your locomotive doesn't have one? So that's your volumes. But before this, we've got some others. Now, number 120, 122 and 123, they're the ones that you choose your air horn, your bell and your prime mover. And if you are using Soundtraxx decoders, you will find that there is somewhere in the number of 30 odd air horns that you can choose from. I think there's a similar amount of bells. Prime movers are set by the type of locomotive it is. So this locomotive's chip, it has got the Baldwin and Others sound profile, which means that all the prime mover sound profiles for it are either to do with Baldwin locomotives, or they've got some others on here like the RGS Galloping Goose, the Dual Wickham, Fairbanks Morse. Most of the veranda turbines are on here as well, and the big blow units. And of course they've got the genset on here, which is why I picked this particular one. 40 different air horns, any number of bells, and for a lot of the air horns, so for example, I've got a K3A on here, I think is what I've got. K3HA is what I've got on here. If you were going for the K5LA, which is a very popular horn, they've actually got several versions of it, so you can try and match your loco to the version that they've got. Other things like here, like poppet valves, I like the poppet valves to be on, so you get that pop pop, which you hear on all American locos, and you can set the rate of that. Just going further down here, we've got things like horn reverb that gives stops the horn from sounding completely flat. The default is 100, so there's a bit of reverberation there, but you can set it up and down. So there are things like the auto brake. So this is when you slow down your locomotive, you'll get the brake squeal come on automatically, and you have to switch that on using CV198. And then you set the rate at which that happens. I default mine to 5. It's just what I do. You've then got prime mover pitch shift. Now this is really handy. So if you've got, like I have, several locos that all have the same prime mover, like my MP15s, you can change the pitch shift of the prime mover, which means that they all then sound ever so slightly different, as they would do in real life, because locos all age differently depending on how much they're used. We've also got on here frequency levels. So this is to do with the type of speaker that you've got fitted. I've just set that at the default, which is flat, because that seems to be working for the iPhone speaker that I've got in the locomotive. And then we've got one of the index CVs about the clickety clack. Now this all Soundtraxx sound decoders have a clickety clack. So as the train moves along, you'll hear clickety clack, clickety clack. Now this is something that can be configured for 4-axle locos, 6-axle locos, etc. I don't like it. I don't want it to be on. So you can go into the index CV 3.258 and you can turn that off. I will talk about index CVs just a little bit later on when we get into talking about function mapping. So they're my sound ones. They're going to be different for everybody. I mean, it's like all of the volume settings. You want to hear it by ear, and you can turn it up and down as you need it, because sometimes the volume is going to be different for a different loco, and will always depend on things like the type of speakers that are in there. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, one of the first things that I do when I fit one of the Soundtraxx sound decoders is I turn the volume down, because they have it cranked all the way up. So I turn it down about halfway, put it to about between 100 and 150. Now just here I've got a section for lighting effects, and in some respects I probably should put some of the function mapping bits in here, but I'm not going to. But one of the great things with Tsunami decoders, there are loads of lighting functions that you can do. You can have strobe lights, you can have flashing ditch lights, you can have Mars lights. You know, there are so many ways that you can set up all of the functions individually so that your lighting does certain things. But one of the things it also has, it has a forward and reverse direction enable. So basically you can set certain functions to only come on in one direction. So what I've done here is I've set up, so using CV57, which is the forward direction enable, I've worked it so that the headlight and the front ditch lights, which are the FX3 and the FX4, will come on if the loco's going forward. As soon as it reverses, if those functions are switched on, then CV58 kicks in, which is the reverse direction enable. So I've put the reverse light on and the two rear ditch lights. You don't have to do this. You can set it up so that you can independently control your ditch lights, for example, so that the front ditch lights only come on if you switch them on, and the rear ditch lights will come on if you switch them on, and that can be non-directional if you want it, because some people prefer it that way. I do it like this because I'm a little bit lazy. Scrolling down, we're now at motor control. Again, Tsunami, Bluenami, and I think the Econami decoders produced by Soundtraxx are very configurable with their motor control. Now, some of it is a little bit of trial and error. No two locos are exactly the same, and sometimes you just have to play with it. It's actually taken me about an hour to get this one running exactly as I want it, to get it nice and sweetly running. The first one is CV25. Now CV25 will tell you what speed table you're going to use. So if it's 0, you are using the bog standard 3-point speed table. That's its default value. You can do a full 28-point speed table if you want to.
I did try it once, and actually it's a lot of work for not an awful lot of outcomes. So for me, I just stick with the 3-point speed table. You've also got CV 66 and 95. This is your forward and reverse trim. And what this will do, if it's set at 0 or 128, it's off. But what it does is it sometimes smooths out some of the jerkiness at low speeds. Again, this is trial and error. It depends on your motor. Some will not need any at all. Some will need it cranked right up or right down. I kind of go in the lower range, so between 0 and 128 as opposed to 128 to 255. And that just seems to work for me. But sometimes I have it at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, depends on the loco. Now the next two, 209 and 210, are to do with the PID-KP and the PID-KI parameters. Please do not ask me to explain what these are. It is something electrical. I'm sure there is somebody out there who will be able to explain what this actually means. All I know is that sometimes if you fiddle with it, if you raise it a little bit, lower it a little bit, it will get rid of certain shudderiness and jerkiness. The next one, 211, is the low speed compensation, and this is about back EMF. I think it's defaulted about 210. I crank it right up to 255. It seems to work for me. I don't think I've actually got any locos that I've got with it any differently. Then we've got 212 and 213, which are the back EMF, feedback intensity, and the sample period. Again, please don't ask me to explain back EMF. All I know is that it can make your loco run better, but it can also make your loco run worse. I think what I've got it set at the moment is pretty near the factory default settings, but again, you know, the sample period I don't change too much. I tend to have it between 5 and 15 somewhere. The feedback intensity, some locos I go up to 255, some I go down to 100. It depends on the loco. Okay, so the next section we've got here is others, and this is for things that don't necessarily fit anywhere else. The first two, 117 and 118, are the independent and train braking rates. So this is to do with the braking function that the Soundtraxx decoders have, where I think on a normal decoder you would press F11, and depending on how you've got it set, it will either put on the independent brake or the train brake. And you just need to add a rate onto this. So by default, the rate is 0, which is basically off, but you can add in whatever values you want. So the higher the value, the slower the train braking rate would be. I found 30 works for me on my smaller layout. The next one is another one of those index CVs. This is to do with DDE, or digital dynamic exhaust, which is something that Soundtraxx again have certainly in their Bluenami and Tsunami decoders. I'm not sure whether they have it in their Econami, but this is where you can set the locomotive up so that if the load increases, it will automatically go up through the revs. So it will go up a notch, for example. So if you're in notch 1 and all of a sudden it feels something heavy, it might go up to notch 2, but it won't increase the speed. It will just increase the notch rate. So you get that kind of realistic, more power being applied as it's required. I'm not going to go into how you set this up. You can see here I say it's calibrated via 2.503 and 2.504. That is something Soundtraxx on their YouTube site, they have got several videos about this and how you do it. Go and take a look. It's how I learned to do it. We're next going to talk about index CVs. So as you've noticed, we've already had a couple where to reach the CV, there's a number in front of a CV number, which, you know, looks a bit confusing. But what this does, it means that the number of CVs that can be accessed is much greater than it would be on an average decoder. And to do that, you have to set the right index up. So they're either indexed at 1 point something, 2 point something, or 3 point something. And what you have to do is make sure that CV32 is set to 1, 2 or 3 depending on which index CVs you want to access. Before you do that, you do need to check that CV31 is set at 16. Now 16 is its default value anyway, so hopefully it shouldn't have been changed, but just in case. So I always make sure that CV31 is set to 16, and then I change CV32 to 1, 2 or 3. After that, once CV32 is set, you can go to whichever CV you want to within the index. So for example, going back here to the DDE sensitivity, to access 2.512 and 2.503 and 2.504, I would make sure that CV32 is set to 2, and then I just put in 512 and then 503 and then 504. Similarly with the clickety clack, that's got a number 3 index, so you would make sure 32 was set to 3. But what this means is that we can then function map, and here is my little section on functions and the way that I've got them set up. Tsunami decoders, Bluenami decoders and Econami decoders have their functions assigned at the factory. Now, interestingly, Athern, who fit Soundtraxx decoders to their locomotives, actually change some of the function mapping, which confused the heck out of me when I first got my first sound-fitted locomotive. But one of the reasons why I've got this list of functions, because actually it's very similar to Soundtraxx's, and with things like the lighting functions, with Soundtraxx's default settings, you have to access them through F24, F25, F26 and F27, which isn't very convenient. And so I have them at function 6 and function 7. And I've done that by mapping them. Now, I'm not going to go into each individual one, but basically each of the functions, not the function locations, but the functions itself, has a CV. So look here at the grade crossing signal, which is normally allocated to F9. I like it on F3. F3 is normally the short horn. I don't use the short horn. If I want to have a short horn, I'll press the horn very quickly. But I put the grade crossing signal there. Now its CV is 1.278. So I go to CV32, set that to 1. Then I type in 278. And then I change the CV to 3. And once it's got a value of 3 in it, that means that that function is associated with that function number, and you can play it. And what I've done is I've set it up so that everything, so you can set more than one function, you can get more than one function on more, on one number. So like here with the light functions on this one, CV 2.59 and sorry, not 2, but 1.259 and 1.260 are set to 6. Now that is the forward-facing ditch lights, the FX3 and the FX4. Now actually, I haven't updated this, I forgot to update it. I've also got 1.261 and 1.262, which is the FX5 and the FX6, which are the rear ditch lights, so that when I press F6, the ditch lights are on. But because I've set them only to come on in the direction of travel, if the loco's direction of travel is forward, the front ditch lights will come on, and when I press reverse, the rear ditch lights will come on. So this is my little list of CVs. Actually, a lot of them haven't changed much. And one that I have got down here at number 25 is the dynamic brake. And I have got locos that theoretically have got dynamic brakes, but because I'm only switching with them, they wouldn't switch on the dynamic brake necessarily in real life. So I've put it down here, but if I ever do get a bigger layout and I want my locos to have dynamic braking, then I could theoretically move it all the way up here to F7, which at the moment it's kind of, it says light function there, but it's just not used at the moment. So these are my CVs and my CV settings. And yeah, if you're programming your locos, make yourself up some kind of template like I have, so that you can keep track of everything that you are doing.
Okay, I hope you've really found that useful. It is a bit of a dry subject, but I think people find decoder programming a bit of a dark art. And actually, once you know where everything is, it's very, very simple. If you went down the Balloon Army option from Soundtraxx where you can actually program it on your tablet or your phone, it's even easier because you don't necessarily need to go into the CVs. You can actually access everything through the various different pages. You can access the CVs, I'm showing my age, CVs on your device. And even with those index CVs, you can go straight to them. You don't have to worry about, trying to access them, via CVs 31 and 32. But all of this is achievable just using your ordinary DCC handset. So always remember, it's not difficult to do. And of course, if you're set up with JMRI, you can program through JMRI as well. That's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. The more thumbs ups I get, the better the YouTube algorithm likes it and decides that, actually people do quite want to watch my videos. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing for the similar reason, but also it means that you can press that little bell, select all, and you will never miss one of my videos as they are released. If you have any comments or questions, either post them below or you can email me on the email address at the bottom of the screen now. And if you want a copy of any of the paperwork, I suggest emailing me rather than sharing your email address on the comments section, and I will send you over a copy that, as I said, you can do with as you please. I'm also available on all of these social media sites. As I always say, I'm very active on Facebook, not so much on Instagram, and Blue Sky. I think I'm probably going to give up on that one because it's not really done what I was hoping it would do. Now, in a moment, YouTube is going in all of its wisdom to recommend to you a video down here somewhere. If you haven't done so already, please go and take a look. If you've seen that video, then go onto my channel and check out the others because there may be something there that you haven't seen. But that's it from me. Thank you once again for watching. My name's Steve. I'm the British Railroader, and I'm saying goodbye from my model railroad room. Bye bye.